Okay, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Again, I think we have a few people on the call, and I think we can jump into our agenda. For those that are not here at the start and jump in a bit later, we will share the recording uh, after the webinar. So if anyone misses out on anything, they will have the recording. So I am Christopher Skalkvik from the ASEN operations team. I'll be your host for today. So what I quickly want to do to start us off, I just want to go through the agenda quickly that everyone knows what to expect for the next hour. And I'll also do a quick introduction on ASEN and the Circular Food Systems for Rwanda project, that this session is a capacity building webinar of. And then after that, I'll hand over to my colleague Kirsten to give us a bit of setting the stage a bit on circular packaging, give us a bit of introduction on the theme for today. And then very exciting, I'll hand over to our two case studies, Josephine and Anita from Gcwalisa and Green Stem Products. So very excited to hear what you guys have to say for us today. After that, we'll have a quick poll and a Q&A session. So during the Q&A session, we will unmute everyone and you will be able to put on your camera. So then we'll have a bit more of an interactive discussion, and then we'll try and close as closely to 2 o'clock as we can. Okay, so quickly, so this is a short introduction to ASEN. I'll go quite quickly through these introductory slides, but I will share all the links in the chat so that you can have a read on whatever I am talking about here. So ASEN is a non-profit company that's registered in South Africa, and we are the Africa's original think and do tank for circular economy transformation. We connect over 1,100 practitioners across 42 countries while delivering tangible impact through project implementation, research, knowledge sharing, and capacitation. So the vision of ASEN is to build a restorative African economy that generates well-being and prosperity inclusive of all its people. And just in the vision, something I always like to highlight here is the word people. Because when in the circular economy conversation, the social and people aspect is many times not focused on that much. So we really try and bring in that social and people aspect. And then how we work towards this vision is through new forms of economic production, consumption, which maintains and regenerates environmental resources. So here in our mission, I also want to highlight the regenerate part of it. So what we try and do is not only doing less bad, but also doing more good. So that's quite important to us. Then just a quick highlight of our strategic priorities at ASEN. Through these connect, empower, and transform priorities on the connect side, we build and strengthen this comprehensive network of circular economy practitioners. We foster collaboration across countries, sectors, and stakeholder groups. So that is this bigger network that we try and, or that we have built through ASEN. On the empower side of things, which this webinar and capacity building sessions are a part of, we equipped our stakeholders with knowledge, skills, and the tools needed to become effective circular economy champions. And then on the transform side, this is the more practical and implementing part of the work that we do. So we deliver impactful programs and projects that translate circular economy principles into tangible business models, policy frameworks, and also systemic change across Africa. So that is what we aim for. And just a quick one on our representation. So we work through a decentralized structure. So as soon as there are enough members in a specific country, we form a dedicated chapter with a chapter lead, and those chapters can then independently do activities in their region as well. So here you can see some of our main chapters on the continent. And as mentioned, we have representation in 42 African countries and over 1,100 members as it stands now. Then just a quick word on the Circular Food Systems for Rwanda project. So this project is a project that ASEN has been a part of for the last 5 years, and the project aims to foster and strengthen circular food systems in Rwanda specifically, and it has a strong focus on SMEs. So what ASIN did in this project, we were implementing partner, which entailed giving technical and business support to the SMEs in the program. There was 20 official SMEs in the program, but then also other SMEs was also involved in different ways and capacities in the program. So we gave them these SME support to improve their ability to utilize circular business models specifically. And I'll also share the link. There's quite a few interesting case studies through this project as well. So I'll share a link on that. But from me, that's enough for now. I think I'll hand over to Kirsten to set the scene for us so we can get into the juicy part of the webinar. Over to you, Kirsten.
Okay, thanks so much, Christo, and thanks to everyone online. It's great to be here and really excited to hear our next few speakers, the insights that they'll bring from the implementation. So my role here, as Christo said, is to set the scene, to give something of the overall circular packaging or circular model approach when we're considering business models in terms of how we deliver products to customer, and then also from the packaging perspective. So from a high level angle, would also love to hear anything that you would like to hear more about in terms of any of the approaches and concepts we speak about today. I would just like to quickly start with a definition, which I have adapted from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, is a systemic approach, and a circular economy is a systemic approach designed to build in long-term resilience into our economy through generating business and economic opportunities that also provide environmental and social benefits. So 3 principles are generally emphasized globally. So driven by design, we need to design a system, we need to rethink the inputs in terms of the material inputs and other resources that we apply in making goods that are then sold and those materials circulated within our economies. We eliminate waste and pollution at the design stage. We cannot solve waste and pollution once a material is end of use at the first use cycle. That hasn't worked globally in terms of designing out waste and pollution in any context. We need to circulate products and materials at their highest value. So we're always thinking about the next life in terms of the materials that we're using in our economy. And when we're thinking about circulating at the highest value, it impacts the design we have for the first use. So the building in that long-term resilience is quite clear in that principle. And then as Christo emphasized, we consider regenerating nature. So not just mitigating the negative environmental impacts, but we move towards a regeneration. And that CIRF has been a really exciting project. And then true to form in terms of ASIN, we add benefiting all members of society. So as ASIN, we emphasize inclusive people-centered design. This definitely does not exclude the higher tech type aspects of an economy that we need to build an effective communication and an effective engagement with the global economy, but it has a very particular focus on the richness of our resources, which is people of our beautiful continent. So I just would like to emphasize at this point, and for those of us in the circular economy space, these might have been some of the challenges that you found. We're not talking about a greenie activist approach here. So we have emphasized people as well, but we are talking about economic development in a circular economy approach. So very critical, particularly in our context, we need to design our systems further that we include growing numbers of people into our economy, and specifically designed to include people into our economy. We're not only talking material resources, that is often the focus in terms of circular economy conversations, but we also need to think about the energy supply, which in itself requires material resource in terms of that supply. So there's a range of different aspects to the circular economy. Circular economy doesn't stick to a sector. We are not a sector as a whole, which we've also been sort of named as, but we think about materials and the other inputs in producing those, extracting those raw materials, producing the products, and then circulating those materials. So we will cross-sector in the material usage. And the plastic space is a fantastic example of that. You have a piece of plastic that starts out as packaging, ends up in the agricultural sector, and then might move, for example, into the construction sector. So there's a lot of diversity, and it's not end of pipe. So as emphasized in the principles, we're talking design here. I just want to throw up some high-level figures. So these are a range of different reports that have been collated in an African Development Bank article, and just emphasizing there is the environmental benefits that we're going to see from a circular economy. If we rethink the way we design our inputs, there will be environmental benefits. But just to focus on, in our context, the potential and new jobs in Africa. And there are a range of modeling studies here. So the dates here, 11 million jobs by 2030. So that is a relatively old study now, but the potential increase in GDP. So please don't focus on the exact figures, and none of these modeling exercises claim to have the crystal ball. But just to give you a sense of what we're aiming at, we're aiming at, and there've been a number of studies that do emphasize this as well, at a greater economic development potential within a circular economy, potential to design more people into an economy across unskilled and skilled labor, as if we compare our business as usual, which is a far more linear economy, where we take materials, make something, use it, and dispose. So just to emphasize, this is our approach in the context. So moving on very quickly, because I really want to hear what our next speakers are going to be saying. In terms of packaging, if we can look at the packaging cycle as a generic. So first of all, we need to think refuse. And I think that is one element of an R that is often not considered. And Josephine will give you a really interesting and helpful model in our context that fits a number of different of our goals, from the environmental, social, as well as particularly focused on the refuse. So do we really need the materials that we're currently using to, for example, deliver our products to consumers? What do we really need? Can we innovate in a way which reduces the material usage, generates income, but decouples that income generation from our material usage? So we're looking to decouple that in particular. So use less materials to generate the same economic returns. In terms of the materials, what materials are we using in our context? And I would like to emphasize here the local. So many of the SMEs in terms of this project, the CIRF project in Rwanda, we're thinking often very local markets. And then for our second speaker, Anita will speak about the global now potential in terms of some of the packaging markets. But we need to think about the market placement. Where are our products going to land, and what will happen to those products end of life? And to rethink our materials, we can't just think around the economics of extraction or even what might be available locally and cheaply, but what will happen throughout the life cycle of that packaging material. In terms of reuse, so again, Josephine will give you her wisdom and share some of the intricacies of the reuse system and the great potential that we see in that space. And then finally, once we've come to an end of use, we need to think about what happens to that material. So once a material has been reused as much as possible within a certain business model, within a certain market, what happens to that material at the end of that lifetime in the economy? We need to think of ways to recover those beneficial elements and recycle them and reuse them back into our economy or space. So that's from more the mechanical recycling aspect in terms of recycling, or we need to think of composting and recovering the nutrients, for example, and even recovering the carbon base is something that we are going to need to pay more attention to into the future. So in terms of packaging, so I'm going to leave the full reuse model type idea to Josephine. You're in very capable hands there. But in terms of packaging and recycling, we need to think of recycling in practice and at scale. So when thinking of packaging in which to place products, where is your market and what does that system look like? What is available, whether informal or formal, to recover those materials and get them either to a composting system if they're truly compostable materials, or into a mechanical recycling system. So recyclability must be practical in our context. If you have oodles of money, if you have squillions, you can throw enough money at any material to recover it and make something else from it. But clearly, practically, that is not possible. And if we think truly recyclable and practice in its scale, we can also design more jobs into our economy. Then, and these are the elements which Anita, our second speaker, will speak ably to, we need to think about what are we aiming at. And I'd like to, I'm putting up a few words on the screen. I'd like to emphasize that there is a lot of complexity in this space, and there are a number of claims which claim to be, for example, biodegradable, claim to be compostable, and are not necessarily that in practice. They don't necessarily function in that way. So you'll find materials claiming to be compostable, and yet the longevity in the environment and what might potentially be released from those products into the environment is detrimental potentially to public, to health, whether of an ecosystem or of a human being. So we need to be very careful on the verification of these claims. Also, oxo-biodegradable just means degrade faster to microplastics. So when you see oxo-biodegradable, think microplastics, basically. So we need to, and then also as a non-technical person within the packaging space, so this is something I learned very rapidly when I entered the space in 2019, 2020, bioplastic, bio-based. These are also often terms which are thrown around, and they're not normally well defined or understood, and they can be used in a greenwashing context. Very happy to have further conversations on that, but I'm not going to go into detail. So when we're talking about plastics in themselves, and that's where more of my expertise sits, or my background sits, is in the plastics, that there is a lot of complexity also within the plastic space. Not all plastics are created equal. And I'm going to have to leave it there because Christo will start glaring at me just now. So then in terms of design, we need to have a system perspective in terms of design. And traditionally, when we spoke about fit for purpose in terms of packaging design, we only meant fit for purpose to protect the product throughout the distribution or the supply chain to the consumer. And once it was in the hands of the consumer, that's where the thinking ended in terms of design. That is no longer the case. We cannot, from an environmental and a social imperative, as well as a very clear economic imperative, we cannot design our packaging in that way going forward. And certain countries, and those represented here in some of your contexts, there are functioning mandatory extended producer responsibility systems, and in others, those conversations are still developing. So in some countries, that imperative has been written into legislation. So your end goal is not to get product to consumer. Your end goal is to get your packaging material to the end of its first life at its highest possible value that gives it the best chance possible to be recovered and recycled into the stream. I have emphasized the economic feasibility and the financial viability of these systems, and that is the case. This is something, the work we do as ASIN in this space, is to work together collaboratively across the value chain, such that business models like Josephine will be sharing, such that innovations in packaging like Anita will be sharing, become more accessible in the economy. So we're not talking around an abstract ideal, we're talking about practical application. And that is a space that we are working in continually. And EPR can be used to incentivize this. So you can be, as in South Africa, be required to have EPR fees calculated according to ease of recyclability. That still needs to be further unpacked and demonstrated in South Africa. So very important, and it's the practical recyclability. Very important in terms of design. As a product manufacturer, you cannot design your packaging only in conversation with the packaging manufacturer. So if you need packaging, if you decide this is what is needed to protect my product, get it to consumers, and have a multiple lifetime, that you cannot only speak to the converter, which is the packaging manufacturer. You must then engage with the recycler. So some of these applications here are applicable to bigger companies and organizations. So even within a single organization, the packaging design cannot be done in isolation. So what we found, for example, in some big companies is that the marketing leads have the first approval in terms of packaging design and not the sustainability team. So we've seen some crazy moves, for example, from a clear PET bottle for water to a liquid paperboard, which has barrier properties to preserve product over very long time scales, which is not needed for the product of water. You're not going to have detrimental effects on your water from sort of the light coming in through a clear PET bottle, for example. So we need to make sure that even within organizations that there is that conversation happening and the links are beyond your organization. So yes, with the packaging manufacturers and suppliers, even those that might support a business model in terms of reuse, but also the recyclers. And then once that you have then been able to verify something will be recycled or has the potential to be recycled in practice and at scale, and certain our recyclers in South Africa advocate for a 30% output recycling rate that indicates scale. We need a threshold to decide on that at scale type metric. You then will need to form this collaboration, and then the collectors will also become important in the conversation. I don't think I'm going to have time to speak to that. But in terms of your impact of your design choices, at the design stage, you need to be collaborating across the value chain, and there are mechanisms to assist in doing that. And that's something that as ASIN we can also play the role in different contexts, is linking to the right players within the ecosystem. But you design in the fate of your packaging, to sound quite dramatic, you design that in at the concept stage. You could be literally designing your packaging to be littered or to end up, blocking a drain, to end up in a landfill. And ideally, or not ideally, from a very practical socioeconomic and financial perspective, we need to change that practice. You also need to ask, is my product contaminant in a recycling stream? So you might find that if it ends up at the right recycling plant or with the right collector, it will be recycled, potentially. But in another stream, it might be highly detrimental. So unless your product is differentiatable, which I don't think is a word, by the collectors, you are not going to get your product into the recycling stream, and you're actually adding cost to the system because your product is then becoming a contaminant in another stream. So that's also another important point to note. I think, Krista, I'm not going to be able to get to my example. Is that true? So I'm going to flick through that. Okay.
I think if you can do it in 1 minute, I think you can quickly do it, and then we can hand over to Josephine.
Okay. I'm going to use an example from externally in the US because it points less fingers at certain local players potentially. But in the US, Colgate designed a toothpaste tube to be fully recyclable within the PE recycling. So within the HDPE or the LDPE stream. So you can pretty much combine those two. They made that specification widely available to all brand owners. So they did the hard yards. They did very good work in designing packaging that would then potentially be recycled. The problem was their toothpaste tube was one packaging example out of a whole suite of examples within the toothpaste stream. And as a result, they then got asked, but how are we going to differentiate your toothpaste tubes, particularly as you're transitioning from the rest of the toothpaste tubes on the market? So collectors, because it's costly to sort and collect and get it to a recycler, would just throw all toothpaste tubes into the landfill stream. What they've done, they've worked very strongly with collectors and recyclers on a global scale. And now I think it was in the UK, something approaching 90 to 95% of the toothpaste tubes on the market in the UK across brands, so Colgate and non-Colgate, are now in this recyclable tube. So they've moved to that collection space. So your responsibility to make sure something is recyclable is critical, but we mustn't forget the collection stream. And because in many of our contexts, the informal sector plays a really big role in the collection of the packaging, and the sort of organic networks of communication are relatively effective, that it is possible to get communication out there that this packaging can actually be collected for recycling. But ideally, we're moving a whole sector at a time. So that's talking about the bigger context on a national scale rather than for the smaller producers. So very important about designing for the system. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Kirsten. I think it's so many important touch points that you mentioned there, and I think we can speak hours on all of those topics. But I think just for our context here, just to save a bit of time, I'll just quickly hand over to Josephine to take us through the Gcwalisa case study, which I'm very excited to hear more about. Over to you, Josephine. Thank you.
Thank you, Crystal. Can you hear me clearly?
Clearly.
Thank you. Just to say, I always enjoy Kristen's presentation because I think you can always learn something new. So I actually didn't want it to stop. But hi, everyone on the call. My name is Josephine Katumba from Gcwalisa. I will be speaking briefly on Gcwalisa today. I'm sure you heard Kristen mentioned us quite a bit and what we've been trying to do through our network of retail outlets in Alexandra Township in Johannesburg, South Africa. I'm bringing a bit of a different approach to this presentation today. I thought that would be good to just speak about the realities that we seeing on the ground through what we're doing at Gcwalisa. We've now been operating, it will be 5 years in April of next year. So it's just a lot of lessons and a lot of things that we've seen on the ground. And it's always good to share these lessons, especially in such a network, because we believe that partnerships, and we just learn different things and grow as an organization from these sort of forums and networks. So I'll start with our why and why we started Gcwalisa. And it's initially the problem that we saw is what we call poverty tax, which is essentially the first problem we saw was poverty tax, which is essentially the higher prices that individuals pay for single-use plastics, especially for food items or essential grocery items. So individuals are usually paying more when they're buying in smaller quantities as opposed to when they're buying in bulk. But for those who are living in townships or rural areas and are unemployed, they're working a piece job, or they're even just dependent on a government grant, it's very hard for them to go buy in bulk. So you'll find that someone will buy something to sustain them for a few days or a day or two, and that will then be in smaller packaged items. And then the second issue that we saw then was that there's just more single-use plastics in these environments everywhere. Service delivery is also a challenge just by virtue of how they're built and just other greater factors. And then more single-use plastic means more pollution in these areas. So essentially, this is kind of the problem that we saw. So it was more expensive, it's more waste, and then it's more money out of the pocket for the consumer or the individuals that are buying. But then we also then saw that there's opportunities even bigger. So millions of stores in these places, what we call the informal economy, not just in South Africa, but across the continent, service the daily needs of community members across South Africa and the continent. So millions of people rely on local stores because they're close. they're trusted, they're accessible, and there's billions of rands and dollars that are spent here. And also then there's just an opportunity, a great untapped opportunity for circularity in these spaces that I think we realized are oftentimes overlooked. So when we talk about circularity, we've experienced it ourselves where we've had people say that, well, no, people in those areas don't care or it's not important. But we just think if you look at the scale of the number of people who live in townships or villages or, rural areas, if we can get circularity right in these areas, I think that the impact would be so much greater. And that's what we're trying to do through Gcwalisa. So it's interesting that both Christo and Kristen mentioned that with the Africa Circular Economic Network, that the focus is also on people. And I think with Gcwalisa, that was also the thing, is that we start with people, right? So with what we've tried to do with Gcwalisa is we allow people to buy exactly what they need when they need it at a price they can afford. So basically with the amount of money that they have. And through that, we're trying to eliminate the poverty tax that I mentioned in the beginning. So I didn't have time for a video of Gcwalisa, so I just put some pictures just so that you have an idea of what I'm talking about. This is one of our 6 outlets. And this is how we do. So this is one of our outlets as well. I'll take you through the process of how customers purchase at the Gcwalisa. So we get our products from a supplier in bulk packaging, and then it's delivered to the Gcwalisa store. And then a customer can buy either through bring their own container or a reusable container. We ran a really amazing pilot with the Circular Cities Labs last year, where we were able to track the amount of reuse in the reuse packaging and just get customer perceptions and community perceptions on reuse packaging. And it was a very interesting pilot to run, and just all around to see that these projects can work, or these initiatives can work in the space that we're operating in. And then the last option is the paper bag option. I found it interesting that Kristen mentioned, and I want to speak to you afterwards about that, because with the brown paper packaging that we do use, the supplier claims that it's compostable and it's made from recycled. So I just want to actually go and really deep dive on whether these claims are true and how true the claims are. So that's what I meant. I always learn something new here. And then finally, yeah, the customer takes their product home, and then they bought just what they need for that day or for a day or two. And our idea is to eliminate thousands of unnecessary individual sachets and packets by selling from these bulk dispensers. And just to get through a bit of our impact to date, so like I said, we have 6 stores. We launched in April of 2022, so we currently have 6 stores in Alexandra. We've got loyalty card members now that we've brought on board since the beginning of last year, and I think now we're sitting at over 2,000. The economic empowerment aspect also then comes in, where we're employing people from the area to run the outlets. Everyone that works at the outlet is from that specific area. And when we do scale, we want to keep that same model. And it just helps with, people then job creation and just economic empowerment, especially for females. It's not by design, but we just find that we have more females. We're talking about it with the team last week, actually, that how do we always find ourselves with so many females? And then the last thing I will talk about here is just that the reuse again. We've really got a beautiful testing ground to try a lot of circular economy packaging, and with the reuse and action, that is exactly what we managed to do with the Circular Cities Labs last year, where the testing ground is there, and we get feedback in real time with customers because we're so close to the customer, and we're literally at the last mile. What I'll get into next is just with what I said, where circularity then meets the reality on the ground. So when we came into Gcwalisa, a big thing for us, and a big thing for us is still, how do we move away from single-use plastics and keep materials in use? The zero waste mindset, and then people also at the center of it, people and planet. And we really want to offer customers more choice, more convenience without compromising our values. But the reality on the ground, and I think Kristen said this out so well, is that it begins at design. And with a lot of manufacturers and producers, plastic is still the default. And, we've approached a lot to say that, why don't we try an alternative sort of way of you supplying your product to us? Because the reality is a lot of the products still come in plastic packaging, whereas we've thought about design ideas where it can come in containers already from the manufacturer or the producer. But we all know the reality is that bottom line is what matters. And almost you kind of see it comes out that the bottom line comes out over the actual impact that we're looking to achieve. And then also we look to balance needs versus circularity. So the one question we always ask our team is like, someone will come, oh, we have such an amazing product we want to offer. And then the packaging, it comes in, and it's always like a choice that we have to make. But then we also understand that we're serving needs in the community, and there's certain products that the community want. So it's always such an interesting balance for us when we're trying to introduce new products. But for us, we always try our best to at least have that conversation, see what's important, see an alternative types of packaging and products that we can bring in so that we do meet the circular ambition that we have. And then what we've learned, just some lessons, even from the pilot that we ran with the reuse, is that behavior change takes time. Traditional retail in South Africa is very focused on single-use plastic, and people have a certain way that they're used to buying food and shopping. So behavior change does take time, but we realize that when you're meeting a fundamental need of people, this behavior change is sometimes accelerated. And then affordability comes first. So if sustainability makes food less accessible, we think that we've missed the point. And that's again that conflict that I said we're always having. So just trying to keep that balance, and then reuse needs convenience. So customers are likely to reuse packaging when it's easy. So we've really at different touch points tried to make it quite easy for customers to reuse the packaging. And then community feedback shapes our model. So we really realized that in all the improvements that we've made and everything we've done, feedback from the community has been so vital and key, because we realize that we have to build with the communities that we serve and the communities that we operate in. So yeah, I think I thought, you know what, let me just shoot my shot on this call, because I know that there'll be very interesting people. So like I said, we're always actively looking for reusable packaging innovations, affordable compostable alternatives, refill-friendly packaging, supply partnerships, food safety, material innovations, because I think some members of the team are on this call. It's not just me coming and saying this, but we always are even just discussing and thinking about how we can look at alternatives in packaging, so that when we do this, we can do this at scale and we can really make an impact on scale. Because over the past 4.5 years, we know that the model works. We know that people are willing to buy in that way. And the bottom line, really, it does work across the board. So what's next for Gcwalisa? We really are looking to expand our footprint within South Africa, and we know that this could even work across the continent. Continue to deepen our commitment to circularity, which speaks to my previous slide, and then just building stronger partnerships so that we can achieve the dream circular model that we're looking to achieve. So yeah, I'll end there. I think that just what I think Kristen said as well is that it is a team sport. So it's not just about changing packaging, it's about changing the system. And we find ourselves at the end of the system. So whoever's in the system that we can work with to ensure that we meet our circular goals and sustainability goals, we really are open to chatting and working and making things happen. Here are my contact details on the slide to anyone who wants to reach out. And thank you for your time.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Josephine. That was amazing, inspirational, and it's incredible to see the opportunities out there. And congratulations for grabbing this opportunity with both hands. So just keeping an eye on the time, I'll move on swiftly to Anita. Our next speaker going to speak about the green stem products. Over to you, Anita. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christo. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you to all the inspiration from the previous speakers. I'm just going to now share my screen. Okay, so I hope everyone can see that.
Yep, perfect.
Okay, yes. So Green Stem Products Limited was created to tackle the problem of plastic pollution. Just one second, just minimize this. Sorry, there's something here that I need to bring down. Okay, yeah. To tackle the plastic pollution problem at scale. As we know, this is a real global challenge. Plastic is made from fossil fuels, and 36% of all plastic produced in the world is used for food packaging, most of which is single use. And we also know that, I think Kirsten alluded to this, that plastic recycling is challenging and largely ineffective. And not only in Kenya, but globally, less than 9% is systematically collected, sorted, cleaned, recycled. The rest ends up in our oceans and in landfill. And it's expected that by 2050, this is a study conducted by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, we'll have more plastic in the ocean than fish. Also, the population of Africa is set to grow by over 50% in the next decade, and this will generate even more waste. So the imperative is very clear. Greenstem wanted to eliminate the problem at source. So as I mentioned, there are a lot of challenges with plastic recycling. Same with aluminium foil containers, a little better, but nonetheless challenging. So, and I also want to say that paper lined with a PE coating may look brown and green, but it's actually not sustainable at all because you need to chop a tree and then line it with plastic to make it waterproof and oil and grease resistant. So the paper will degrade, but the plastic will become a microplastic and end up in the food system. So I wasn't interested in plastic recycling, wasn't interested in paper with various coatings, and aluminium foil is not really a great option either. Therefore, we decided that we wanted to make packaging that was made from a renewable source. We did lots of trials with different agricultural byproducts and eventually settled on sugarcane bagasse. And therefore, our packaging is free of trees, free of all kinds of toxic chemicals like polyfluoroalkyline, paraffin wax, and plastics in terms of coatings or wet strength resins that are put normally into pulp. And completely home compostable. It took almost 3 years of research to get to a point where we've been able to achieve this with our packaging. So this is what we've been able to achieve since Greenstem was set up. We are very fortunate to have an abundance of not just sugarcane bagasse, but other agricultural byproduct options in Kenya. But we do have an abundance, almost 1.5 million metric tons of bagasse annually. And we have a very good supply chain for the bagasse. The second thing is not only is our packaging 100% home compostable, but also our manufacturing process is completely clean and green. So our boiler is fired by bagasse pellets as well, rather than charcoal or wood chips. And we don't use, as I mentioned, any toxic chemicals, so we can recycle all our water. And we just change the water once a week when we need to clean out the whole system. And then all edge trims and rejects are also repulped and turned back into packaging. So the basic concept is you take agricultural byproduct, which is a renewable resource, turn it into packaging that lasts as long as the shelf life of the food product in it and not the plastic on the planet. And then that goes back into the soil and it contributes to new plant growth. So there you have the home composting element, and we've been TUV home compost OK certified, and that took a 6-month rigorous testing process in Germany. What we found is that we also have some strategic advantages of being located in Kenya. We have very good tax agreements with the UK and the EU, enabling exports. We also have good freight routes to North America, Europe, and the UK, and this presents a comparative advantage. There's also heavily taxed packaging from China into the UK, into the US, which places us in a good stead in competition with China globally. Yeah, I'd say that we also have a strong social impact angle, which I will come back to further on. So the global market is growing, and it's at present standing at $16 billion for fiber molded packaging. And as you can see, the food service sector is by and large the largest. So that's what we are focusing on. I mean, we could easily do electronics packaging, we could do industrial packaging, we could do medical, trays and instruments and so on. But the focus initially for us is on food packaging. So these are some of our current clients in Kenya. We are now export ready, and therefore the focus for the last quarter of this year is going to be on exports. Okay, so this is a little bit about our journey. We started in 2022 with the proof of concept. We trialed a lot of different raw materials, from sugarcane bagasse, wheat straw, rice straw, water hyacinth, seaweed, moringa, bamboo stems, banana stems, etc. And we figured out how to boil the byproduct, how to extract the cellulose, what to do with the black liquor, which is a further byproduct of cooking, the sugarcane bagasse, and then transforming that into a sustainable product that is as good as plastic or better in terms of functionality. In 2023, we raised the finance to construct the facility and bring in the machinery. In 2024, we installed all the machinery, did the safety testing and so on. 25, commissioned the plant and got all our national and international certifications. So here's a little bit about the social impact. So we have strategic partnerships with 3 organizations in Kenya. The idea was to create green jobs for women, youth, and people who are differently abled. And so we have 70% women. We wanted to break the stereotype that women cannot work as engineers and so on in factories. So Clean Start is a charity that works with women who've just come out of prison and reintegrates them back into society. Talking Hands refers women from the deaf community, and Dr. Choksi's Albino Foundation, women from the albino community. And there on the left, you have the circularity in action. So I've already described that in some detail. But the basic idea is that we are very clear about where the raw material comes from. So there's very clear forward and backward traceability. And then we are very clear about end of life and the concept of doing no harm to the planet and leaving no footprint behind in the process. So this is our team. It's a very international, multicultural team. We have a good stable team now, I'd say, and we're growing. So we have a mix of engineers, food scientists, veterans in the packaging industry, financial advisors, and I'm focused mostly on the research, innovation, new product development, and business development. Yeah, so we've raised about $4.6 million to date. We've still got a little more funding to raise to get us over the line. And we are hoping to reach profitability by the end of this year. Now that production is stable, the quality of the team is stable, the quality of the product is very good, and it's very multi-purpose actually. We're able to use the packaging for a lot of applications: protein, so meat and fish, baked goods, pet food. You'll see there my little dog with his pet treats, hot food, so restaurants for takeaways and deliveries, and then for the horticulture sector, so fruits and vegetables. And our packaging is microwave safe, oven safe, freezer safe, fridge safe, and there's no change in taste and smell, especially with the hot foods. It's water resistant, oil resistant, and we've even done some trials with Kenya Airways, and I think we're about to crack the airline sector. So I'd say that it is much better than plastic in so many ways. It's a little more expensive than plastic, but hopefully as we scale and with the economies of scale, we can become a more competitive and truly viable option. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Anita. I get goosebumps to see all this project and the progress and amazing work that you guys are doing. So congratulations, and excellent to hear that you're profitable already. That's amazing news. And then just something that I'm taking from both these speakers, both from Anita and Josephine, is showing the amount of effort that needs to go into these type of innovations. There's time, there's effort. People really need to work hard to make these things work. And I think you guys are a great example of what can be done. We can't just wait for the big corporations to give us solutions. We need to work hard to get these solutions. So thank you very much. That was amazing. So I think what we can do now, we still have some time. Thank you very much to the speakers who kept you guys kept us within time. So we still have some time for a Q&A session. So I have allowed mics and cameras. So if anyone wants to unmute and ask a question, please feel free to chip in. And while we're busy with that, please just it's 10 or 20 seconds to scan the QR code. I'll put the link in the chat here as well to our survey, if you can quickly address that. And I think we've had, while we're waiting for people to jump in, there was 2 questions that I noticed. Maybe Josephine, for you, the question from Chris is, are you only looking at food at this point, or do you extend it to other home use products like softener or washing liquids?
Thanks for the question, Chris. Yes, we do. We have an extended range. So we look at detergents as well. So dishwashing liquid, all-purpose cleaners, fabric softeners. And then we also have gone into personal care quite recently. So yeah, it is across the board. It's not just foods.
Brilliant. That's great news. And then the 2 questions for Anita that I also see in the chat is the one, don't know if you saw, so the time frame, how long is this product water or oil proof? And then I'm also curious to hear how tough the journey was for certification. I think there's many people who probably have that question.
Yeah. Okay. So for water, about 72 hours. And for oil and grease, for the restaurants, 4 hours. And just so you can see, I'll just show you really quickly. So this is what the sugarcane bagasse looks like, right? So that's what it looks like. So we turn that into this. So if you're not using this for, hot, wet food, this can be used multiple times for dry food. It is reusable. We wouldn't advise washing it though. Yeah, so on certifications, Kenya has a very tough regulatory environment. So the national compliance was quite vast, shall we say. But then for export, we got the BRC, British Retail Consortium certification. And then we had to get all the SGS testing done for, like I said, microwave oven, sensory, water resistance, oil resistance, pesticide residue in the bagasse, no polyfluoroalkyline. And then we got the TUV Home Compost OK certification. So these certifications take between 3 and 6 months to obtain. The TUV took 6 months because they have to do all the biodegradation, disintegration, and ecotoxicity testing. So just to say that our packaging completely biodegrades within 4 weeks. There's 100% disintegration, and then it contributes to new biomass and seed germination. So yes, it can take between 3 and 6 months for certification, plus a lot of preparatory work. So for the British Retail Consortium, you need a whole quality management and food safety system in place, which is a huge investment. You need to have the human resources in place. You need to have the food safety and quality team. And then there has to be a lot of training for this team in terms of internal audits, hazard and risk assessments, and a plethora of procedures, policies, and forms that need to be created and then systematically completed and documented. So once you've done the initial hard work, it's about maintaining the systems, right? And then, the third year of the British Retail Consortium audit is unannounced. So you really need to make sure that the systems are there in place and that you're maintaining the quality standard. So it's about ingraining it in the culture or the DNA of the organization.
That sounds like quite a process, Anita. So well done on going through everything. And I'm sure that there was some useful information for our audience as well. Go ahead, Chris. I see your hand. And if there's anyone else that wants to ask a question, please raise your hand and you can jump in.
Yeah, just another follow-up to that, Anita. I mean, we all know about the cost and time of these sort of certifications. Are they transferable to other markets or other regional areas? So, for example, the ARSO, African Regional Standards Organization, are they applicable to penetrate other African markets without having to go through the process again? Or is this something which is going to be a constant journey of different systems and sessions?
Yeah, it depends. It really depends. So first, are you making the exact same product in multiple countries? Because if you are, then, for example, for the SGS testing, or the TUV, you would only do it once, right? You would send samples from those different locations. But for example, for the BRC or FSSC or IFS, that's very much linked to the facility, right? And all the prerequisite programs in that facility. So pest control, waste management, hygiene, personnel hygiene, plus the hygiene of the premises. So that would have to be done on site in different locations. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, thank you very much. So you're basically going to be sweating for a long time. So good luck and well done.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can only agree with Chris. Go ahead, Kirsten. I see your hand. And I think this might be the last question if there's no one else.
Okay, if there's anyone else, please jump in ahead of me. But just echoing the congratulations to both of you, Josephine and Anita. This has been a long journey, and the sort of building on the quality foundation you have continues. I think also what we're seeing, and Anita, I think you referenced it in our pre-meeting chat, is also the requirements of the export markets.
Yes.
So I'm engaging currently around the PPWR and the potential barrier and opportunity. Let's reframe it.
Yeah.
The PPR regulations refer to the fact that they want the source markets of products to be subject to the same legislated standards. And I see that it's saying that many are interpreting or emphasizing that means the same legislation in terms of food safety, in terms of packaging, in terms of waste management and recycling is enshrined in legislation. whereas normally in the brands that we've been dealing with, a BRC certification is highly acceptable, which means we don't need to then take the very long journey to get those elements enshrined in our own national legislation. So wondering about the barriers in our export markets, and hopefully we can work together within our African context to break down the barriers to local market access.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with that.
Thanks for that, Kirsten. And then I just want to highlight something that Chris mentioned now in the chat as well. It is very annoying that the current more bad system does not need to jump through all these hoops, but we that want to do something better needs to go through all of this effort. So that is very frustrating.
Yes, exactly. So Chris, not only do we need to do more, we need to invest more financial resources. We need to over-engineer our product so that, it looks, feels, performs, or outperforms, conventional packaging that's bad for the planet. It's just, I think Josephine will agree with me. It's only uphill.
Yeah. And I'll never forget, just to an example that comes out in the unfairness of this, how different products are rated. I know Chris has given this example in the past where there was a brick of recycled material, building brick that was built, and as part of the test, you need to test the brick until it breaks. You need to test it until destruction. And the brick was so strong that they created that it didn't break. So they couldn't get certification because it couldn't pass the test because the brick didn't break. So because it is better than the conventional bricks, they couldn't pass the test. So it adds fuel to those frustrations. But on that note, everyone, I think we are over time, 3 minutes over time. So thanks a lot for everyone that has sticked with us. We will share the recording of this event to all the registrants as well. So please look out for that, and please stay in touch for any of our future events that we will be sharing on our social media and through our email campaigns. With that, I just want to thanks everyone. Thank you, Anita, Josephine, and Kirsten, for your time and effort. This was really an interesting topic, and I think very valuable information that came through. I'm sure the audience will agree. So if there's nothing else, I think for now I will close the session, and we'll see you guys in the next one.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, all.
Thank you very much, guys. Have a great day.
Bye.
You too.